Rallying, be it at World Championship or British Championship level, is the ultimate test of the resilience of car and driver. The World Championship route covers snow and ice in Sweden, desert tracks on the Safari, dust and gravel on the Acropolis, the fast tarmac of Portugal and San Remo, and the forest tracks of the Thousand Lakes and Lombard RAC. The Shell Oil's British Championship is the classic combination of forest and tarmac that this year came down to a thrilling last round decider. This production features excerpts from the coverage of BHP as provided to BBC Television Sport and adds up to the comprehensive picture of the 1989 rallying year. Not much had changed for the opening round. There was Yorkshire mud, snow, ice. Last year's winner Pentti Jurikala going for victory again, but this time in the showroom class in his Group N Mitsubishi. Jimmy McRae here was once again contesting the top honours in the Ford RS Cosworth. McRae, 5 times Open champion, but he'd have Ford opposition from Brooks and Lovell and strong opposition from Toyota. Stage is comparatively firm and fast, and McRae was quick until a mistake viewed from inside the pursuing Vauxhall Astra of Malcolm Wilson.
Somebody else. Easy right, long, continue. Pass left.
We just slid off, and it was a left and a right. It was very muddy and very sleet. About 2 inches of mud. The car just understeered into the grass verge, and we couldn't get the thing back on. We had to get some spectators to give us a push back on. So we lost about a minute and a half.
McRae slips back. Vauxhall were once again spearheading the front-wheel drive contest. Louise Aitken-Walker and Malcolm Wilson here, making up somewhat for the early exit of Vauxhall's new Group A Nova GTE. Wilson and Ian Grindrod here on the Harewood stage.
Straight for about 100, pass left, then 50, open hairpin right.
Malcolm Wilson appreciating early on that the cartel rally stages were better suited to the Fords, and indeed the Toyota Celica GT4 of David Llewellyn that found itself holding a comfortable lead over the Mazda of Torbjörn Edling. Sophisticated engineering on board the Toyota, and it's taken a while to make it reliable in rallying conditions, but Llewellyn seemed on course for a drama-free success. The surprise of the event, Sweden's Torbjörn Edling in the privately entered Mazda. He'd led early on, but with the support of only 1 service van and 2 mechanics, he was giving second best to Llewellyn. Håkan Eriksson has clearly had an eventful debut, and Vauxhall claimed the front-wheel drive honours from Peugeot. Quite a battle for the places behind Llewellyn and Edling. Lovell lost ground with a turbo problem, but his teammate in the Mike Little prepared cars, Russell Brooks, was having to try as hard as he could to hold off the challenge of his old rival Jimmy McRae. Lovell using every inch of the road at the Oliver's Mount hairpin, but Brooks was third, McRae would settle for fourth, Jurikala fifth, and winning Group N. And this is 6th place Gwyndaf Evans in his Group A debut. Much more would be heard of him as the season progressed. But a victory on the cartel for Llewellyn and Toyota. The perfect start as Toyota GB launched its first serious assault on the British scene for many years. The result, and therefore the championship table, Toyota expected to set the pace in the forests, but on the tarmac things could well be different. And the next round was on tarmac, the BIF Circuit of Ireland. There was no doubting that Llewellyn looked impressive around the tight, twisting Irish lanes on a rally that he's won before, but he reckoned that the Toyota was losing about 2 seconds a mile to the opposition. However, when rain came, there was a chance that this disadvantage might be turned around. Wet or dry, it looked exciting enough alongside co-driver Phil Short.
Left. Into 2 right tightens, gravel, 3 left. 1 right, 100. Caution, bump, 3 right tightens, into 1 left. 150. Crest, 3 left tightens, narrows, wet.
When the rain came, Llewellyn tried to press home an advantage. The consequences weren't hard to predict.
2 right, 130. Square.
Well, we went into a field basically, and my luck wasn't with us. There was a 4-foot ditch the other side of the hedge. Otherwise we just sort of popped over the hedge into the field and out. But there was a 4-foot ditch and we nose-dived into the ditch. And as you can see, it was a bit wet in there.
So one distant challenge was removed from the path of Jimmy McRae, the undoubted master of the Circuit of Ireland, going for his 7th win on the event and his 3rd in succession. Things a little more ragged in the up to 2-litre category. A rare mistake here from Malcolm Wilson. Wilson had been lying 6th, but misjudged the section coming off the cobbles, clouted a metal post, wrecked the suspension, and that allowed teammate Louise Aiken-Walker to claim the front-wheel drive honours. Up front, a charging performance from Russell Brooks was making life very uncomfortable for Jimmy McRae. Indeed, Brooks was into the lead, and it was McRae who had to do the chasing. Pressure too from Brooks's teammate Mark Lovell, lying 3rd. 4th place Gwyndaf Evans, an eye-catching if inconsistent drive, but one that promised much. Austin McHale, with his local support, always tries to deliver on the Circuit of Ireland and rarely disappoints. Colin McRae, trying to emulate his father, was leading Group N, but punctured on the final stage, which handed another Group N success to Pentti Aurikkala, although he came close to throwing it away in the Mitsubishi Galant. And this is how that fine piece of control looked from inside the Mitsubishi.
Whoops. Well held. Okay, 100.
Class success for Louise Aiken-Walker and the 16-valve Vauxhall Astra. Strong challenge from Håkan Eriksson in the Peugeot finished when he was penalised 10 minutes for a wheel-changing infringement. But in the damp conditions, Jimmy McRae reclaimed the lead from the fighting Brooks for a 21-second victory, his 7th on the Circuit of Ireland. It also gave him the championship lead by 2 points from Russell Brooks. Fords all the way down to Aurikkala, the Mitsubishi leading Group N and well-placed overall. The contenders gather in Cardiff for round 3, the Fram Welsh International, just like old times, with McRae vying for the British Championship with Russell Brooks. David Llewellyn, though, was the man who carried the pressure and expectations. He's come close, but he's never won his home event. The mistakes on the Circuit of Ireland would hurt a lot more here, especially on the loose surfaces on which the Toyota is meant to thrive. In the Welsh Forest, it was Llewellyn who took the lead early on in a concerted attempt to dominate the opposition. Closest challenge from Brooks, and he was soon nearly a minute behind the flying Toyota, and that despite a completely trouble-free run on very fast stages. In 3rd place, Jimmy McRae gave chase, but he was nearly 2 minutes behind Llewellyn. Then there was Mark Lovell, 5th early on, but then out of the rally when he abandoned the Ford Sierra Cosworth in a ditch. Gwyndaf Evans was giving another eye-catching performance. At this point he's up to 4th, the Welsh school bus driver also on home ground. But perhaps the most impressive behind Llewellyn was Aurikkala. 4-wheel drive, 4-wheel steering, showroom Mitsubishi, and in the top 6. And Pentti composed behind the wheel. Less composed, his Group N rival Colin McRae, who wrote his car off in an overnight accident. There was a debut for Skoda's new challenger, the front-wheel drive favourite, John Haugland at the wheel. But the Vauxhalls continue to be the class of the front-wheel drive field. Malcolm Wilson once again successful in the 2-litre class. Håkan Eriksson challenged in vain for Peugeot, but they were successful in the other classes via Chris Birkbeck and Simon Davison. But this was the victory that the home crowd wanted. David Llewellyn storming home for the first home victory on the Welsh International since 1966.
Been in the position twice before where I've led the rally with
4 or 5 stages to go by 30 seconds, so they were very hard work, because always in the back of my mind was perhaps just falling off the edge like it happened before. So you know, it was really nice to get through those stages and get to the end.
Llewellyn's second victory of the season, but it only brings him to 5th in the championship. McRae and Brooks tied for the lead after finishing 2nd and 3rd respectively on the Welsh. Round 4 stayed in the Forest for the Scottish Rally. Jimmy McRae was keen to prevent a Toyota clean sweep of the British Forest events. But this is only the 2nd stage. We're riding with a Rickola, and there's McRae's co-driver Rob Arthur waving us past a burning Ford. Cause of the fire, a mystery.
We don't know, just, well, a fire, obviously, under-bonnet fire. Towards the end of this last stage along straight, it just started smoking from under the bonnet. We tried to get it to the end, but the fumes and the flames started coming through the tunnel in the gearbox, so it was time to get out.
And time for Llewellyn to get to work via the Knockhill race circuit and the forests that follow. Llewellyn lagging behind the early leaders, Lovell and Brooks, but anxious to make progress on the forest terrain that so suits the Toyota.
Long 4 right open. 30 absolute right over crest, and open right 100 narrows. Caution square 5 right.
And as the rally moves north, Llewellyn leads with 7 stages gone. The Fords had shown their style on the brief tarmac sections at the start of the rally, quite some style from Mark Lovell. Lovell conceded that he was always going to lose time to four-wheel drive opposition in the forest, but he was enjoying the contest with his teammate Russell Brooks. And indeed Gwyndaf Evans here. The order was Brooks, Lovell, Evans, 3rd, 4th, 5th, behind Llewellyn and the Lancia of Sebastian Lindholm. Brooks would then lose time with a puncture, but he was turning in the kind of consistent point-scoring performance that would make him a strong candidate for the title. Apart from that mistake on the Circuit of Ireland, they don't come more consistent than Malcolm Wilson, heading for another class win and another overall 5th position. Surprise in Group N, though, where Colin McRae attacked from the start and burnt off any possible challenge from the Mitsubishi of Rallye-Gruppe. Group N victory for McRae. Rallye-Gruppe's dominance in the showroom class is broken, but there's still little chance he'd be caught in the overall championship. Another determined performance from Hakan Eriksson in the Peugeot ensured that he at least split the Vauxhalls, taking 11th overall ahead of Louise Aitken-Walker. And this is the Lancia of Lindholm that stayed in touch with Llewellyn, then took the lead and then almost immediately crashed out of the event. That was the decisive incident that handed a 3rd victory to Llewellyn, 3 out of 3 for Toyota in the Forest. Llewellyn the winner from Mark Lovell and Gwyndaf Evans. And Russell Brooks had to settle for 4th after hitting problems on the very last stage. And that could well have a big bearing on the overall championship. But victory for Llewellyn on the Scottish, and as you can see, it's one that moved him into equal 2nd place with Gwyndaf Evans, only 8 points behind Brooks. But Brooks had the chance to build his lead on the 2 tarmac stages which were to come. The first of these was the British Midland Ulster Rally, round 5, and the Ford set out to demonstrate very early on that this was their kind of country. Opening stages, and Fords were in the first 5 positions. But on the damp roads, Russell Brooks here is 3rd, behind Lovell and McRae. This is Lovell with co-driver Ronan Morgan, and Lovell had adopted his usual tactic of a very spirited attack right from the start. As the competition unfolded, it was Gwyndaf Evans who was making the biggest impression behind Lovell. He went past Brooks and McRae to lie in 2nd place, 14 seconds behind the leader. David Llewellyn had lost touch right at the start. An electrical problem on the opening stage had cost him 3 minutes, but there was no doubting how hard he was trying to make it up. McRae, carrying a few dents and the #1 of the defending Open champion, was having to battle hard. A puncture delay and other mechanical problems wouldn't prevent him carrying on, though, for a top 5 placing. Always a popular sight on the Ulster is Bertie Fisher. The rally uses his Ballina-Mallard garage as a service point. Spectators helped him back on the stage after he'd gone off, and as a result, Fisher is locked in a battle with the now charging Llewellyn for third and fourth. Behind BMW and Toyota, Peugeot and Vauxhall. Malcolm Wilson struggling this time because of a transmission seizure. So honours in the category go to Harkin Eriksson. Not only a class win for the Peugeot 309, but 6th overall. Unexpected class win also for the Skoda Favorit, going well in the hands of John Haugland. Up front though, gearbox failure for Lovell, turbo failure for Brooks, and Gwyndaf Evans gains his first international victory, a result that threw the climax to the championship wide open. Brooks by 5 from Evans and by 10 from Llewellyn. Scores have to be dropped in the championship, so the advantage possibly lay with Llewellyn, except that the next round, the Tudor Webasto Manx International on the Isle of Man, was on tarmac once again. Gwyndaf Evans with a shot at the title, even though it's his first year in Group A and only his second year in international competition. Russell Brooks, twice a champion before, desperately keen to claim the title again, but knowing that his lack of outright victories counts against him in the points analysis. But he's pushing the car and co-driver Neil Wilson very hard.
Bad left opens, medium right, K left, and right, and flat right, straight left 100, flat right maybe, tightens over jump 200, easy left tightens over crest 50.
Brooks giving it a lot, and he was the early leader, but teammate Mark Lovell was visibly trying harder. Sartfield hairpin though, and Lovell is quick to react to the cameras. Jimmy McRae takes a little while to dial himself in, and while he does it, his son Colin takes third place ahead of him. Colin McRae getting his first Group A drive in the series. Evans out front early on, then he crashed out of the event on stage 10, at which point David Llewellyn was quite handily placed in fourth, but then came trouble. In fact, a gearbox problem that required a complete transmission change. As the seconds ticked by, Llewellyn and co-driver Phil Shaw knew that not only were their prospects of Manx victory disappearing, but with one round remaining, their championship prospects as a whole were receding. So Evans out, Llewellyn out, and Colin McRae out. That bad landing breaks the differential and spells the end of a spirited Group A debut. Mixed event for Auricola, way down the order, but not low enough to miss being confirmed as Group N champion. But this combination were named stars of the rally, and deservedly so. Dave Metcalf and Nicky Grist in Vauxhall's little Nova GTE. Despite all the bigger, more powerful machinery around them, they came home fourth overall, ahead of Ford Cosworths and Audi Quattros. But while that was happening, Lovell had charged to the front with a splendidly aggressive drive, but his teammate Russell Brooks was the one with the championship chance. So, team orders. Lovell must let Brooks past, which he did with a flourish on the final bend of the final stage. Not the first time Lovell has been the victim of team orders on this event, and he vents his anger on the camera crew.
To win this rally for 5 years.
Lovell has to wait for his teammate to pass to claim the victory, which meant that the championship stayed alive to the last round, the one-day sprint of the Audi National in the forests of Wales. The Isle of Man would confirm Brooks as championship leader, but with only the best scores counting, in fact it was Llewellyn with his hat-trick of forest victories who was in the stronger championship position. Llewellyn was fourth behind Gwyndaf Evans. Even second in the last round behind Brooks would be good enough for Llewellyn, and Brooks wasn't confident.
The odds are stacked against us because it's a loose surface rally. As you can see, it's slightly wet, the forests are going to be very greasy, so the advantage is entirely with the four-wheel drive car. What we've got to do is go as hard as possible, and if David has any problems, a puncture or mechanical problem, we've got to be there to capitalise on it.
It's in between Russell and myself, and I don't actually have to beat Russell, but I need to be within one place of him. If he gets maximum points, then I need to be second, and I just take the championship from him. But if he comes down the order and comes second, then I've only got to come fourth. So really, it's just keep an eye on Russell, and I think perhaps Gwyndaf, because obviously the Ford cars will be trying to get in between us. If Russell's leading, then obviously they'll be trying to get Ford cars in between us to push me back so we can win the championship. Really, they're ganging up on us, I think.
So a 7 a.m. start in Welshpool, and then the first of the 11 stages on the loose surfaces that have given Llewellyn so much success this season. No detailed pace notes, so Phil Short gives what guidance he can.
It's on like this, medium twisty down the hill. Still medium twisty. Tightens here.
Wet and slippery, and Llewellyn takes the cautious approach. Not so Russell Brooks, who's as good as his word and attacks from the outset. And he's an astonishing 8 seconds quicker than Llewellyn on the opening stage. Top-running Fords outnumber the Toyotas 8-2, the second Toyota being that of Graham Middleton. And being so close to the RAC, there are big international stars like former world champion Timo Salonen in the Mazda. For Jimmy McRae, strong opposition in the form of his son, Colin. That was one of the side issues. The main issue, Brooks against Llewellyn, and the odds were stacking higher and higher against this man Brooks. Not only the lack of four-wheel drive, so essential on forest surfaces, but the weather had closed in. Heavy rain, the stages ever more slippery. We're on board with Brooks, though, as he continues to mount a quite astonishing attack. Neil Wilson is the co-driver, and see how many times the Ford Sierra Cosworth seems to be sliding out of Brooks's control.
Tight to the right.
This is the first time that the Shell Oil's British Championship has been decided by such a sprint event, and Brooks is no doubt thinking that if he can get in front, time might run out on those trying to catch him. However, if Brooks makes a mistake, there's very few stage miles to make up the deficit.
Going to be a very long left. There's lying water and everything.
That was one point where Brooks, with his hand wrenched off the wheel, came close to losing the championship. At this pace, there'll be plenty more moments like that. Llewellyn, despite all his advantages of grip and traction, must have been amazed at the pace his rival was setting. But he lay second in front of Timo Salonen and wasn't going to be drawn into an ill-judged counter-attack. Even so, life on board the Toyota was no more relaxing.
Continues fast, twisty, through the logs. Still the same, fast, twisty. When you get the arrows, it's a hairpin left a bit early. Comes up a bit sharply. Here we go, on the inside. Okay, long, fast right.
The Audi Sport Rally with international status for the first time, but drivers like Timo Salonen have been coming to the event for many seasons, gearing themselves up to the kind of conditions they'll face on next month's RAC. Jimmy McRae, winner yet again of the Circuit of Ireland this season, is familiar with these conditions, but he's not so familiar with the close challenge of his son Colin, now pitting himself against his father in equal machinery after proving himself so well in the Group N showroom class. And with 4 stages gone, it was McRae Jr. 4th, McRae Sr. 5th. Family rivalry of a different kind existed between Brooks and his teammate here, Mark Lovell, so disappointed at being denied his deserved Manx victory. He was 6th after the opening 4 stages. Home event this for Gwyndaf Evans, 3rd in the championship after his excellent win in the Ulster Rally, but he's made a disappointing start. One of the stars of the Manx had been Dave Metcalfe in the little Vauxhall Nova GTE, and Metcalfe was with the front runners up in the top 10 once again. The leading Vauxhall's challenge was Malcolm Wilson in the Astra, although it wasn't a happy start for Wilson, losing the best part of a minute after a spin on the opening stage. However, Håkan Eriksson in the Peugeot wasn't able to take advantage in this class battle. He suffered gearbox problems, so too did Wilson's teammate Louise Aitken-Walker. In Group N, that Sanders showroom class, Pentti Ricola has already taken the title, and the conditions were perfectly suited to the four-wheel drive Mitsubishi, so Ricola in charge there. Up front, Brooks would like to have been in charge, but in fact he was just hanging on, hoping his luck lasted. After 4 stages, he had a 14-second lead over Llewellyn. This is stage 6, the treacherous and slippy Garthainog stage. Brooks doing his best to keep it all together, but his luck was about to run out.
Tightening to the right.
The car had come to rest with the rear wheels off the road.
I'm pushing them in.
And time was being lost in a big way. So patience was rewarded, and Llewellyn found himself in the lead. 17 seconds, his advantage over Timo Salonen's Mazda. It was a full 4 minutes before Brooks could get going again. By then, he dropped from 1st to 11th, and the championship chance was gone. A longer event, and there might have been a chance to remount a challenge, but only 5 stages were left, and that was no time for Brooks to make up the leeway. Jimmy McRae here, who's dominated the British Championship in recent years, was also having a difficult time, particularly with tyre choice, and he was 5th behind Gwyndaf Evans. But here in 3rd place was Colin McRae, an impressive leader of the Ford runners. So the order: Llewellyn, Salonen, Colin McRae, Evans and Jimmy McRae. Graham Middleton in the 2nd Toyota dropped down to 6th after a puncture. This is 7th place man Pentti Ricola, the leading Group N runner. Behind Ricola, Dave Metcalf in the Nova was leading his more powerful Vauxhall teammate Malcolm Wilson. But Wilson here in the 16-valve Astra was climbing up the order after his early problems. Halfway point of the rally, service halt for Toyota, and the smile on the face of David Llewellyn says that everything is going to plan. All Llewellyn had to do really was keep going, and the Toyota mechanics try to ensure there's no problem in that direction. But there's a moment for Llewellyn to reflect on the fortunate developments of the last stage.
Russell went off on stage 6 for 4 minutes, so that's eased the pressure a hell of a lot. So, you know, I know it's not really nice to smile, but he was going so quickly that it was either win or go off. And the stage has been very, very tricky. I mean, he must have been sticking his neck out to put up the times he's been putting up. So, obviously, I'm quite happy to be back in the lead again.
You were surprised, were you, at his speed this morning?
Very surprised. I knew that he'd go quickly on the first 2 because every year he seems to. But then he kept that pace up. And I was very, very surprised on some of the later stages how quick he was going. I mean, he was doing the same times, even quicker than us. And I mean, the conditions just don't suit his car at all. So he must have been driving like a demon, you know.
Into service is Brooks. You'd expect him to be angry, to be frustrated, but in fact he's merely philosophical about a brave gamble that didn't pay off.
What happened? Just slightly too quick. We slid wide on a corner, didn't actually go off the road. The back wheel was just on very soft mud, and the car just sat on the chassis rail as the wheel spun. Eventually we got 1 spectator there, and that was enough to push us out, but we lost 4 minutes. But there we are. I mean, the only thing we could do on this rally was attempt to beat a 4-wheel drive car, which is a very tall order, and we were pushing things absolutely to the limit all the way.
3, 2, 1, go.
Well, that's not a tactic that Llewellyn had to use anymore, although there was still one challenge left to him. Coming into the final spectator stages in the town park at Telford, former world champion Timo Salonen had moved into a 2-second lead. Llewellyn was determined to get that back in order to preserve his record of winning all 4 forest rounds. So he did need to mount an attack, but in similar fashion to Brooks, a mistake could cost him the championship. Thankfully, no damage resulted from that, just a loss of face, and Llewellyn was able to continue the charge that soon swallowed up Salinen's lead and a fair bit of the town park turf as well.
Long crest into 2 left tightens into turn hairpin right.
David Llewellyn and Phil Short en route to victory in the Audi International and victory in the 1989 Shell Oil's British Championship. Second place for Timo Salonen and Mazda, an impressive warm-up run for next month's far more testing Lombard RAC rally. Colin McRae got third, a notable victory over his experienced father. This is fourth place Gwyndaf Evans, almost 30 seconds ahead of Jimmy McRae in fifth. Sixth place and the second Toyota, that of the already crowned national rally champion Graham Middleton. Behind Middleton it was Pentti Aurikkala in seventh, and then came the brave but the luckless Russell Brooks in eighth. He was ahead of Malcolm Wilson in the Astra, and there was another excellent top 10 finish from Dave Metcalf in the Little Nova. But the winner and the champion, David Llewellyn with co-driver Phil Short. And this is the result that ensured that Wales, so often the hotbed of the sport, could at last celebrate a homegrown British champion.
Well, I'm delighted, of course, to have won the Shell Oil's Open Rally Championship, and on this event, and to win this event just by a couple of seconds from Timo. And don't forget, you know, the Welsh. I mean, that's got to come into it. All in 1 year. I mean, it's great, and I'm absolutely delighted.
Where do we go from here, David?
Well, the RAC, of course. That's put me obviously in a very good frame of mind for the RAC, and without it being in a championship that I'm competing in, and we can go out there and have a go and try and fly the old flag up high amongst the top runners with a bit of luck.
Final championship positions with just the drivers' best scores having been counted. The first 4 there have all claimed Open Championship wins this season, but it could well be that 6th place man Mark Lovell could be another to watch for the RAC. The continued prestige of the World Rally Championship was rather let down by its low-key opening on the snowy forest tracks of Sweden, the Swedish rally counting toward only the Drivers' Championship and not the manufacturers. So, just like the forthcoming Lombard RAC rally, the front-running Lancias were absent. It left a great opportunity for the flying Mazdas of Timo Salonen and Ingvar Carlsson, and they were into the lead early on. The Lancias in the field all privately entered and struggling to stay with the Mazdas, although they filled 3rd, 4th and 5th places after the first leg. Toyota also had only a nominal commitment to the event, and the 4-wheel drive Celica GTs of Kenneth Eriksson and Leif Ashterhag were spectacular, but off the pace. Despite appearances, it was mainly ice and gravel on the stage surface. That didn't suit Blomqvist in the Audi, and the 5-times winner was just hanging on to the top 10. Britain's Colin McRae was getting World Championship experience in Blomqvist's 1988 Sierra Cosworth, and he was going well. Vauxhall had Astras for Malcolm Wilson as well as Bjorn Johansson and Håkan Eriksson. Wilson would finish 13th, Johansson and Eriksson 9th and 10th. But it wasn't going to be the expected Mazda 1-2. Timo Salonen ploughed off the road during the second leg, handing victory to Ingvar Carlsson. A second World Championship success for Mazda and the first for Carlsson. So Lancia, despite distancing themselves from the event, were able to claim second place through Per Eklund with his British co-driver Dave Witter. Third, as conditions got progressively worse, Kenneth Eriksson in the Team Sweden Toyota. Running the rally in January was not a success. Packed snow, sheet ice, which gave no end of problems, some of which could be overcome. And indeed, Sig Olaf Wolfridsson recovered from this to finish 8th. A result which certainly wasn't the shape of the championship to come. Off that caption, but worthy of mention, young Colin McRae, who brought the Ford home in 15th. At Monte Carlo, the entry of the world champions Lancia. Everything that's exciting about the sport, but also everything that's bad about the sport. The car's fast, the crowd control appalling. The damage to Alex Fiorio's car here, testament to an incident that injured 2 spectators. The next day, in what was more of a freak accident, the unfortunate Fiorio went off again. 2 spectators were killed. For the time being, it had a sobering effect on the crowds, and they watched the Toyotas of Kankkunen and Valdegaard try to match the leading Lancias of Biasion and Oriol. Hannu Mikkola was trying hard for the Swedish winner's Mazda, but the opposition was much stronger here. Sensation of the event, a man who starred on the Monte Carlo before, Ari Vatanen, bringing every ounce of power out of the Mitsubishi Galant and taking the car into a surprising 3rd place. But here are the leaders, a class of their own. This is Mickey Biasion, just a few seconds ahead of Didier Auriol. Auriol tried to keep in touch, but Biasion was piling on the pressure, and a few puncture problems saw Auriol slipping behind. Moving ahead of Vatanen to complete a Lancia 1-2-3 was Bruno Savi of France, and most of the cheers would be for the Frenchman as the rally reached its usual emotional climax on the Col de Turini. However, Biasion stayed in command to complete a victory by almost 6 minutes over Didier Auriol, with Savi taking 3rd. A crash had put an end to Vatanen's spectacular drive, so it was Hannu Mikkola in 3rd for Mazda, and 4th for Toyota was Juha Kankkunen. But the Works Lanciers had shown their power. A 1-2-3 success. Biasion now tied after 2 rounds with Ingvar Carlsson of Mazda. And Mazda had chosen to miss the next round, the Portuguese rally. Mind you, Portugal was billed as a showdown between Lancia and Toyota, a showdown that Lancia won in quite overwhelming fashion. The early Lancia order was Auriol from Biasion and Allen. Alex Fiorio in 4th was threatening to make it another emphatic Lancia clean sweep. It hadn't all been gloom for Toyota. Carlos Sainz had led for the first 2 stages, only to be rapidly overhauled after a puncture. Juha Kankkunen went off the road and was unable to make up the 16 minutes lost. Bjorn Valdegaard went out with broken transmission. Sainz crashed out. The Toyotas could offer little resistance. There was only a distant challenge from the likes of Marc Duez in the BMW M3. Not liking the changeable conditions, Duez would finish 5th. Ahead of him, a somewhat neater drive from George Fischer in the Audi 200 Quattro would be rewarded with 4th. None of which could prevent another Lancia 1-2-3 for the 2nd World Championship rally in succession. Victory once again to Mickey Biasion, who was showing the style that had given him the world title the previous season. Lanciers were in the top 4 places at one point, 9 of them in the top 12. But that was spoiled when Didier Auriol here went out with a broken clutch. And that allowed Marco Allen up to 2nd place in his first event of the year. But last season's RAC winner wasn't without his problems. The driver's door here heavily dented after a collision with a tree, which nearly put him out. 3rd place in Portugal went to Alex Fiorio. 7 deltas in the top 10, Lancia claiming their 49th World Championship victory in overwhelming style. And Biasion's 2nd successive win gave him the clear leadership of the Drivers' Championship with 3 rounds gone. The Lanciers were quick, but were they reliable? The next round would be sure to establish that. The Safari Rally on the rutted, muddy East African tracks. Starting and finishing in Nairobi, 4,500 kilometers, the cars taking on a more workmanlike appearance compared to the streamlined machines on the first 3 rounds. And there were 3 Delta Integrales for Biasion, Fiorio and Jorge Recalde. This is Fiorio on his East African debut, and the early leader was Recalde from Biasion. The challenge would come not from Toyota but from Nissan, always strong on the event, and the Kenyan Mike Kirkland would eventually claim 2nd. Per Eklund, off the road more than once, struggled to give support, and he eventually went out for good on the 44th stage. 3 times winner Bjorn Valdegaard led the Toyota effort, eventually claiming 4th, and you can see the cautious approach that's required on what is acknowledged as the toughest event on the World Championship calendar. Ahead of him in 3rd, an excellent performance for Volkswagen by Stig Blomqvist. And Volkswagen had entered this event thinking they could win it, and they'd given everything they had. But instead, Lancia emerged from the dust as victors, and once again it was Mickey Biasion, the Italian, judging his drive to perfection From 59 starters, there were only 13 finishers. Biasion certainly had his moments of doubt, with big mechanical problems over the last few stages, but he came home for his third successive victory and a 40-point lead over Carlsen and Blomqvist as the championship returned to Europe for round 5, the high-speed tarmac of Corsica. No Biasion in Corsica, but Lancia remained strong, even though conditions favoured the rear-wheel drive cars like the BMWs. Rain came eventually, and then the four-wheel drive Deltas were able to use all their power and performance. And the most impressive was last year's winner, Didier Auriol. He was driving for Ford in 1988, but now for Lancia, he was letting loose all his talent and aggression. Sabi was one of the less happy Lancia drivers. A misfiring engine left him out of contention, while Auriol built his lead out front. Toyota often get the chance to lead a rally early on, but even that was denied them in Corsica. But at least Kankkunen kept going to claim third place. That was third behind the rear-wheel drive BMW M3 of Francois Chatriot, the closest challenger to the winner Didier Auriol. BMWs prepared by the British ProDrive team, previous winners of the event, and they brought home Chatriot second, Beguin fifth, and Duez sixth. But the weather certainly aided Lancia's four-wheel drive cause. Victory for Auriol on the streets of Ajaccio, and that was enough to move him into second place in the championship, 25 points behind Biasion, who'd returned to the fray for the next round. The historic surroundings of Athens, providing a title and a starting point for the Acropolis Rally. An event which would tell a great deal about the strength of Lancia and the challenge of Toyota. Biasion on the left for Lancia, Kenneth Eriksson for Toyota, whose other big hope was former world champion Juha Kankkunen. Big event also for Ari Vatanen and Mitsubishi. And Mitsubishi also for Jimmy McRae and Rob Arthur. So, round 6 of the World Championship. Lancia may have looked unbeatable so far, but waiting in the wings, they had the new 16-valve Integrale. And this event would tell them how urgently it was needed, how swiftly the opposition was closing the gap. And Toyota, via Kenneth Eriksson, took their customary early lead on the opening spectator stages, a lead that wouldn't last very long. Mitsubishi were fielding just about their biggest team, and after their showing on the Monte Carlo, were really beginning to make an impact on the World Championship scene. But the story was Lancia again. Didier Auriol had been out front and then dropped back after colliding with a rock on some of the roughest stages that the World Championship encounters. And that enabled Mickey Biasion to hit the front once again to claim his 4th win on his 4th event of the season. Auriol fought back to second ahead of Fiorio in third. Once again, a Lancia 1-2-3. Kankkunen had made a fight of it, really battling Fiorio hard, but then he went out with suspension failure. So too did his well-placed teammate Carlos Sainz. Early leader Kenneth Eriksson went out on stage 12. All in all, a rally that Toyota would want to forget. But it was a very promising event for the Mitsubishi Galant. Vatanen, running in the top 3 for a while, was competitive with the Lancias. Oil loss forced him out on the 22nd stage, but Jimmy McRae kept going for an excellent 4th place in what was a one-off drive with the team. He lost a little time with suspension problems and the loss of turbo boost, but he got the car through to a very good finish. But Biasion stretches his lead to 30 points, and he looked uncatchable at the halfway point of the World Championship season. Entering the second half of the World Rally Championship season, one issue was decided. Lancia were once again champion manufacturers. They'd won every rally the Works team had entered. After 8 rounds, Mickey Biasion's dominant lead remained at 30 points, even though he hadn't competed in Argentina, a rally which was won by Michael Eriksson, once again for Lancia. And that brought the field to one of the most famous events on the World Championship calendar, the Thousand Lakes Rally in Finland, quite similar in character to the forthcoming Lombard RAC, always fast, always very closely fought. Among the manufacturers, it was Japan against Italy. Toyota, Mazda and Mitsubishi ranged against Lancia. And Mitsubishi had new cars and a new driver. Vatanen paired with the Argentina winner, Michael Eriksson.
I'm very hopeful for this rally. I have a good feeling for the new Mitsubishi. And, well, I can't tell you so much more.
Its handle is very predictable. Because it's big and slightly heavy, but the good side of that is that it's very stable and doesn't make any nasty moves suddenly.
I don't think it's fair to compare the cars. All I can say is I have a good feeling for the new car here now.
Flies very well indeed and lands well too.
The acrobatic qualities of a car have always been important to Vatanen, and he set about flinging the Mitsubishi around the forests of Finland, 500 kilometers of forest gravel stages. And both he and Eriksson were well placed early on to profit from any Lancia problems, and they soon had them. Definite problem for the Corsica winner Didier Auriol, limping through the stage with collapsed suspension. Problems for Mazda, who'd withdrawn from the championship in order to develop a quality machine fit to beat the best, but more work was needed. Mikkola was out after only 5 stages. Now, last year's 1,000 Lakes developed into an epic battle between Alén and Kankkunen, and as this year's event settled down, the same pattern emerged. Kankkunen ahead over the swooping, dangerous jumps that so typify the event. But Alén was charging, and he's closed to within 5 seconds. But perhaps the Finns' greatest hero is Vatanen, and he was still in touch in 3rd. But another Toyota was right behind, Carlos Sainz in 4th, in what was building up to be the best contest of the championship. Sainz's Celica showed the heat of the battle. Poised to play what would turn out to be the most important role, Michael Eriksson in 5th, because ahead of him, all was about to fall apart. Kankkunen would be out of the lead when his Toyota caught fire. Marco Alén's bid for victory ended with a blown head gasket. That left Vatanen briefly in the lead, but he went out with a broken crankshaft pulley. So Carlos Sainz disputed the lead with Michael Eriksson. Toyota versus Mitsubishi, and for a while that assumed the same quality as the earlier battle between Kankkunen and Alén. So often the 1,000 Lakes is the preserve of the Finnish drivers. To see a Swede contesting the lead with a Spaniard was a rare thing. Here's the Swede, Eriksson, promoted from 5th to 2nd by the extraordinary sequence of events of the previous few stages. Then he took control himself and moved the Mitsubishi past the Toyota and into the lead, but it was still very close. The other challenges were distant. This is the leader's namesake, Kenneth Eriksson, who eventually would get 4th place, but a fair way back. Michael Eriksson had hit the front with 20 stages left. Coming to the end of the 2nd leg, Sainz was hanging on behind and seemingly saving himself for a big effort on the tough final day. Mazda had profited from the problems of others, and Salonen had got up to 3rd. And another Mazda driver, Michael Sundström, had tucked into 4th. But out front, it was Mitsubishi from Toyota. And struggling was the World Championship leader Mickey Biasion in 7th, hampered by turbo problems. But before the end of the day, the main issue was decided. Carlos Sainz, trying just a little too hard, had gone off the stage, rolled the Toyota. He'd kept going, but had lost almost 4 minutes to Eriksson.
We roll. We missed 1 second gear then, and we have very bad luck because we roll. And after we have a puncture, and we couldn't take off the spare tire because we hit, and just we lost about 4 minutes.
A dozen stages left, completed in relatively untroubled fashion by Michael Eriksson for Mitsubishi's first World Championship success and Eriksson's 2nd successive World Championship victory. The Lancia stranglehold broken. 2nd place for Mazda, Timo Salonen. Carlos Sainz with a Toyota, still flapping bodywork, and he recovered to take 3rd. And the next significant finisher was the 6th place man and World Championship leader, Mickey Biasion. A modest entry then headed down under for the inaugural Australian rally, won by Toyota with Juha Kankkunen. That had no great effect on the World Championship table as the competition headed for the Rally d'Italia, or San Remo, as it's better known. There, attention was focused not only on Biasion clinching what seemed to be an inevitable world title, but also on the competition debut of the newly liveried 16-valve Delta Integralis. A car apiece for Biasion and his teammate Didier Auriol. But for Oriol, it was a painful and almost fatal day.
I arrive in the jump, and okay, when I have practice, I pass 6 times the stage. It's practically flat. I just remove the gas pedal, very little, and here I arrive flat. I remove, and no, it's not a crash. But okay, it's mistake, yeah? But never I have things, and I can do that here because in practice it's all right, and it's all right.
Very bad out today.
For Oriol, the event was over. For others, it was just warming up. Lancia led, but in the shape of Alex Fiorio. The son of the Ferrari motorsport boss had taken the lead from Biasion on the 6th stage. Behind Fiorio, 2 charging Toyotas. In second place was Carlos Sainz, anxious to make up for his costly mistake on the Thousand Lakes. And behind Sainz was Kankkunen, who'd also had an early spell in the lead. And then came Biasion. He dropped out of what looked like a strong lead when a tyre virtually rolled completely off the rim. Now he was attacking the leading 3, spurred on by a fanatical crowd, anxious to keep their Italian world champion. Leading 2-wheel drive car, Marc Duez. Fortunately, the crowd, fanatical as they were able to take avoiding action when Duez made the occasional mistake. Alex Fiorio, second so often in World Championship rallies, looks comfortable out in front. Behind him, Kankkunen's challenge disappeared when a drive shaft broke, but Sainz was still looking strong. And as the sun came out, conditions started to favour the Toyotas, but Fiorio kept going as hard as he dared. 20 stages gone and Sainz took the lead, but Biasion was mounting another perfectly timed charge. He started the final day well over 2 minutes behind Sainz, but took time off the Spaniard on virtually every stage. Behind him, another charging drive from the Lancia recruit Dario Cerato. He was moving up into 4th place, sweeping past the troubled Kankkunen. Ahead of him, Biasion had now gone into the lead with 3 stages left. This was Italian drivers and Italian cars giving their best on their home ground. A demoralised Sainz saw possible victory turn into 3rd place as Fiorio got past him into 2nd. And Kankkunen, with a catalogue of problems, was hanging on to 4th. Sniers got his Toyota into 5th, then came the rear-wheel drive BMW M3, Marc Duez, quick and entertaining. Second yet again in a World Championship rally, Alex Fiorio. He was second 4 times last year, including this event, the San Remo. Ahead of him, though, Biasion was hitting mechanical problems on the final run-in, and his margin of victory over Fiorio became a mere 5 seconds. That's enough for the win, though, and enough to confirm him as world champion for the 2nd year running. So the Italian Biasion 41 points ahead of Fiorio after 11 rounds, an unbeatable lead, but the championship isn't over. The 1989 Lombard RAC Rally, the final round of the World Championship, but no world champions. Lancia, who emphatically claimed the manufacturer's title and helped Mickey Biasion retain his World Drivers' Championship, considered their job was done and opted out of the grueling test provided by the British forests. But world-class manufacturers and drivers of proven class remained, and they would be introduced to crowds of over 100,000 in Sunday's spectator stages. Lancia's absence certainly seemed to leave the way clear for Japanese success, with Toyota having the strongest chance. British champion David Llewellyn was the big British hope. Sweden's Kenneth Eriksson and Spain's Carlos Sainz were drivers of great ability. But there were few people betting against Juha Kankkunen, the former world champion and a proven winner on the Lombard RAC. Kankkunen had won the event in 1987, then driving for Lancia. But this season, in the Toyota Celica GT4, he's been limited to 1 victory on the Australian Rally. But on the stately homes and the race circuits of the opening day of the RAC, A Toyota was the car to have, and Kankkunen was right on the pace. He'd gone off on the first corner of the first stage, but he was in the lead by stage 3 and stayed there through Donington Park and Silverstone. He had a 5-second lead at the end of the opening day. This is Spain's Carlos Sainz, certainly tipped as a world champion of the future, and this year he came very close to victory in Finland's Thousand Lakes Rally, the world championship event that's closely related to the demands of the RAC. Sainz was quickest on the opening stage, 4th overall at the end of the day. Kenneth Eriksson recovered well from leaving the handbrake on for the first stage, not quite as bad as last year when he was the rally's first retirement, going out on that opening stage with a broken camshaft belt. Good first day, and he'd finish it in 2nd place. There was a feeling all through the day that the Toyota drivers were trying just a little harder than is usual on the opening day, but cutting the corners around the straw bales of Donington is less hazardous than it would be in the forests in the days to come. David Llewellyn, though, has already proved himself in the forests. His victory last month sealed a long overdue British Championship, but now for a bigger challenge.
With the season we've had, you know, winning the Shell Islands British Open title and getting that behind me, obviously I'm in the right frame of mind for the job, and you know, the Toyota has proved very, very good on the British forest this year, and you know, it's the same forest, well, mostly the same forest we're using on this event, so you know, we're hoping that we can do the job and have a bit of fun at the same time.
Sometimes in the past, Llewellyn has appeared to be a little burdened by the constant high expectations, but he rose to the occasion on this first day, 3rd place overall, despite a costly puncture at Chatsworth. And just look at this for confident car control around the twisting layout at Silverstone. End of the first day, there will be Toyotas in the first 4 places, so where was the challenge coming from? Well, possibly from Mitsubishi with the turbocharged 4-wheel drive, 4-wheel steering Galant. We know all about Pentti Ricola from the British Championship. He was getting his first chance in the Group A car, teammate to Ari Vatanen. Vatanen won the '84 RAC in the Peugeot, the car in which he later had the accident which nearly cost him his life. He's won Paris-Dakar since then, but not a World Championship rally. The Galant could be the car to provide him with that.
This very deceptive car, I think, it's because of the size. It's rather big, which can be a handicap sometimes, but it makes it more stable, and it's quiet also, and people think that the noisy cars are the only fast ones, and in fact it's deceptively fast.
By Vatanen's own admission, he wasn't on his best form on the opening day. There were electrical problems which left him short of power, and he was also quick to admit that the driver wasn't firing on all cylinders either. In car with Vatanen and co-driver Bruno Berglund.
Hairpin left, 100, left and hairpin right.
The mist was no more than an irritation on the first day. Within 24 hours, though, it would be a bigger problem. This is Vatanen at Donington Park.
20. Okay, right, maybe. And double caution left of a brow, into narrow, 8.
End of the opening stages, Vatanen was no better than 8th, ragged but entertaining. Pentti Ricola had been given his one-off Group A drive by Mitsubishi as acknowledgement of his fine performance in gaining the Group N title for the manufacturer on the British Championship. He declared himself genuinely excited by the greater power and performance. He's an experienced driver, but with little World Championship involvement outside this event in recent years. He finished 4th in a privately entered Lancia last year, and if he can get to grips with the Galant, he could be a genuine contender. But a Ricola would be 5th at the end of the day. The two-car entry from Mazda provided amply qualified drivers, even if the machinery wasn't quite of world-beating pedigree. Behind the wheel, though, two of the best. Hannu Mikkola, 4 times a previous winner, and Timo Salonen, whose victory on the RAC came in 1986 in a Peugeot, the year after he'd won the World Championship. Rally cars looked very different before the rule changes that immediately followed that event. A striking contrast indeed between Salonen's Peugeot of '86 and the four-wheel drive Mazda that he was pinning his hopes on in 1989. The car, rather underpowered, would have its best chance if the weather got cold and the stages were frozen, but that wasn't what they were forecasting. Timo Salonen struggling to keep in touch on day one, and he was 7th overall. Salonen's Mazda teammate, Hannu Mikkola, the last of his 4 RAC victories was in the Audi Quattro in 1982. No one has bettered his record on the event. And one thing in Mikkola's favour for the RAC, he was reunited with his longtime co-driver Arne Hertz, the man who'd sat alongside him through all his successes on the event. It looked a stiff task for Mikkola, but remember last year when he was leading into the final morning only to make a mistake when blinded by the sun and he went out of the event. Mikkola definitely a man who could get into a winning position. At end of day one, he was 10th. Vauxhall shouldered a large part of the British hopes with 16-valve Astra GTEs from Malcolm Wilson, Britain's only A-seeded driver, and Louise Aitken-Walker, Europe's #1 woman driver. And they also had the potential for springing a surprise with one of the most astonishing cars of the year, the Nova GTE. On the Isle of Man, in the hands of Dave Metcalfe, it came in 4th overall, a car that could maybe achieve something more than just a class win. But the Astras would be the front runners, Wilson usually the quickest of the Vauxhall drivers, but not by much. His ambition would be a decent top 10 placing and honours in the front-wheel drive contest, in particular against the old rivals Peugeot. Louise Aitken-Walker has had some wretched luck on the RAC in recent years, so a decent finish, her simple ambition, and the team got the drama-free opening day that they wanted. Other British hopes were mainly driving Fords. The McRae family were united under the RED team banner. Jimmy McRae, immensely experienced on the event, but fully aware of the rear-wheel drive car's unsuitability for what was to come. His son Colin enjoyed matching his father's times on the opening day. Colin is quick but unpredictable, not the ideal combination for the RAC. Russell Brooks has so often been Britain's top finisher on the event, and his British Championship performances this season show he's still a driver to be reckoned with. His teammate in the Mike Little prepared cars is Mark Lovell. The McRaes, Brooks and Lovell, as well as other Ford drivers like Gwyndaf Evans, were all outside the top 10 after the opening day. The Lanciers that were to be seen in the field were privately entered. There was one for the RAC regular Per Eklund, who was 9th. That put him ahead of Argentina's Jorge Recalde. But Audi's Armin Schwartz would go out after a road accident. Peugeot's Håkan Eriksson, another first-day casualty, on what had been a rather strung-out, frustrating opening day. 35 kilometres of stage miles, but as far apart as Chatsworth and Silverstone, Donington and Blenheim. But to come with the Welsh Forests, Scotland, the Lake District and the likes of Kielder, Juha Kankkunen held a 5-second advantage on a leaderboard dominated by Japanese manufacturers. But the competition had yet to begin in earnest. The Welsh Forests, Day 2, the start of the genuine action in the 1989 Lombard RAC Rally. The Toyotas had set the pace on the opening day spectator stages, and as the early fog cleared, they remained in charge, but the internal rivalry was fierce. Kankkunen led, but was hounded first by Kenneth Eriksson and then by Carlos Sainz. This is Sainz. Early in the day, he watched Kankkunen and Eriksson swap the top spot. Toward the end of the day, he'd be out front, getting overhauled by Kankkunen. It was quite a battle, and Toyota, so desperate for World Championship success, were already considering the possibility of team orders. But they wouldn't get too confident. Problems for David Llewellyn would remind them how fragile such domination can be. fifth stage of the day, and Llewellyn, the strongest British hope for years, suffered turbo failure and dropped to 77th place. Effectively, his challenge was over. But those were problems for Toyota GB. Toyota Europe were going strong. Kenneth Eriksson surprised a lot of people with his pace. He certainly surprised Kankkunen early on. Mitsubishi continued to offer the strongest challenge to Toyota, but the surprise there was that it was Auricola as much as Vatanen putting the pressure on, most of the time at least. Two fastest times for Pentti during the day, and he would finish it fourth behind Kankkunen, Sainz and Eriksson. After a lackluster first day, Ari Vatanen was finding his rhythm. 4 fastest stage times during the course of this second day. This was more the style of the 1984 Lombard RAC winner. Vatanen going well, but the day had started badly, with a loose nut finding its way into the turbo system of the Mitsubishi. The unit failed, and Vatanen struggled for 3 long stages. But now he was making up for it, and would finish the day well placed in 5th. The Mazdas were making consistent progress. Timo Salonen here was right behind Vatanen in 6th place. The lack of power of the Mazda especially noticeable on the tight hairpins. Both Timo and Hannu Mikkola were using their cars from the Thousand Lakes Rally, but by the end of the day, they'd be looking rather different. The adaptations were due to be made to Mikkola's car, looking good up until the 12th stage. And that's where he missed a gear, put the car on its roof, and came out looking like this. In all, Mikkola and Hertz, the most successful combination in RAC rally history, lost a total of 1.5 minutes and dropped down the order to 15th. The privately entered Lanciers filled the 2 places behind Salonen. In 7th was Michael Sundström, and in 8th, Sebastian Lindholm. Then came the Mazda of Ingvar Carlsson and the Lancia of Per Eklund. For a while, Russell Brooks had been the leading British runner, but by the end of the day, that position was taken by 11th placed Malcolm Wilson in a front-wheel drive Astra, underlining the fact that this wasn't a Ford Cosworth event. But the Cosworths battled on, carrying much of the British interest. Jimmy McRae was going safely, but behind him his son Colin McRae, young, exuberant, always prone to a mistake, and he made a big one in Dolgethley, sliding into a ditch, and he left the car in a very sorry state. Russell Brooks, as we said, was leading the British runners, getting up into 9th place, but he was to become the first major British retirement. Brooks, taking part in his 22nd RAC rally, went out of the event after 14 stages.
The second Dovey stage, either a piston broke or the turbo broke, we're not quite sure which, but we lost all the oil in the space of 2 or 3 miles, and then obviously the bearings went, so although the car was still drivable, just it wasn't going to go very much further.
And that came after the biggest British disappointment of the second day, David Llewellyn.
Basically the turbocharger blew and an oil pipe was ruptured and all the oil came out of the engine, and I had to fix it, and we lost 17 minutes. That's it basically. Most of the oil had pumped out of the engine, so there was very little oil pressure, and we just had to tickle through sort of 10 miles, and it was painfully slow, like 5 miles an hour, and we lost all that time and all the chance of the win, really.
Kankkunen led at the end of a hard day, his biggest concern anticipating the problems.
Look at the extra light, it's still, you know, there.
Day 3 to Carlisle via the faster stages of the Lake District. Crowds continuing to find even the deepest recesses of the forest. And on day 3 they were joined by the old touring car rivals Frank Sittner and James Weaver, acquainting themselves with this non-contact motorsport. But for Kankkunen it would be a tough day. He'd suffer a loss of brakes and an alternator problem, and would come under increasing pressure from his charging teammate Carlos Sainz. Sainz had finished the second day just 19 seconds behind Kankkunen, and he beat Kankkunen on 3 of the first 7 stages of this third day and matched him on 2 more. Kenneth Eriksson also was still in touch. He was 29 seconds off Kankkunen's lead after 2 days, and then he got fastest times on the first 2 stages of day 3. Toyotas still seemed to be in control. And because of that, no one seemed to be taking the confident early challenge of Pentti Riikola too seriously. But he was driving hard and driving well in the Mitsubishi, waiting for any problem from those in front, and before the day was out, he'd get his reward. Before that, though, would come a mistake from his teammate, a mistake that virtually ended Vatanen's challenge. Fortunately for Vatanen, he finished the right way up, shaken, but only about 30 seconds lost at this point, but the handling of the car would be drastically affected. This is why it's always a gamble to try and cut corners. Vatanen launched by a tree root, and out of the smashed windows goes all Bruno Berglund's maps and service schedules. But rally spectators are a generous lot, and while Vatanen got on his way, they collected up all the paperwork and returned it to the crew that evening in Carlisle. But the Mitsubishi Galant was now very second-hand. He was losing more time with the obvious handling problems and had dropped behind Salonen and Sundström. David Llewellyn still in the rally, but 34th. He comes to the same corner that Vatanen got so wrong. And he makes the same mistake. Saves it from the roll, but the drive shaft is broken, the chassis bent. Llewellyn is out. Very soon the brake problems would catch up with Kankkunen. Saints would lead, and Riikola here would go second. 44 years old, past his best, a talent that had never quite been seen to mature. Well, Pentti was poised to disprove all of that. Kankkunen was only just behind, though, and there were other former world champions set to relaunch an attack. Timo Salonen, by the end of the day, would be 5th. But Sebastian Lindholm, placed 8th after day 2, wouldn't make it to day 4. As evening fell, he went off, becoming a victim of Kielder. Thus, by the end of day 3, Per Eklund would be the top-running Lancia privateer, lying 8th. Eklund, with his aggressive, committed style, he's been rallying for 25 years, was 4th on the RAC in 1985, and always a popular visitor to the British forests. But one of the star drivers and star cars of the day was Malcolm Wilson in the 16-valve Astra GTE. Definitely the right conditions for the front-wheel drive Astra. Wilson would be 10th at the end of a day in which he was consistently matching the pace of the more powerful entrants around him. The British Ford drivers in Wilson's wake, Jimmy McRae, 38 seconds back at the end of the day. And in 13th place, behind Hannu Mikkola, Gwyndaf Evans. And through Grisdale, Evans commented that he'd never driven such a challenging stage, nor had he driven in front of such large and enthusiastic crowds. Crowds enjoy seeing spectacular attacking driving. Mark Lovell usually provides that, but he was back in 16th. And Lovell's missing rear window was an illustration of a quite adventurous day. Colin McRae's Ford also bore the scars, but at the end of the day, he would be out. On the 32nd stage, he would collide with Franco Cunico's pristine Ford, which broke down on the stage. McRae collided with it, both were out. Still flying, Dave Metcalf's Nova. It looked fast, and there were unlikely rumours that Metcalf had scored a fastest stage time.
Everybody keeps saying that we've got the fastest on that one, but I think we'll have to wait until that's confirmed more than anything. I think we have the class lead quite comfortably, but we're just trying to get a good overall position more than anything. So we're just going hard all the time, just to keep everybody who's behind us, who's trying to make advances on the little Nova behind.
The day would merge into the night in Kielder Forest, where Toyota's confidence was shaken by the loss of Kankkunen's lead and the growing pressure of Riikola on Saints. It was clear that a Japanese manufacturer was going to win the Lombard RAC for the first time, but it wasn't clear where this valuable prize was going to go, Mitsubishi or Toyota.
the time normally,
Really?
because I think the car is working very well, so it's easy to be relaxed. Team is working well, so it's now down to me, and I'm very happy.
Those were the front runners, but the battered Vatanen couldn't expect any sympathy from an old rival like Timo Salonen.
Ask what happened. How car is so bad looking?
It's like your car normally, Timo.
No, I never see so bad car.
I just got the corner, Timo. I should not cut the corners. I learned it from you. And there was a tree stump in the grass, and that's it.
I think so. Back to driving school, I think so.
Seriously, Harry, what happened this morning?
No, exactly. I just got the corner on the first Chrysler. Not much, but there was a tree stump in the grass, and it just launched it over immediately. Front wheel was bent, but that's all. They're all aligned now.
The car might have been back in shape, but Ari was struggling to remount his challenge. In Kielder, the view from the Mitsubishi was unclear, but the confusion was obvious. Vatanen back in 7th place, but his teammate had split the Toyotas with 2 days left. Ricola 30 seconds ahead of Kankkunen, a minute 36 behind the leader, Carlos Sainz. And the pressure on Sainz for the 10 stages of the 4th day. More action in Scotland, more action in Kielder. He'd never been in such a position before, he'd never won a World Championship rally, and behind, Ricola was getting faster and faster. In fact, Ricola was fastest on 9 of the day's 10 stages, an astonishing performance that cut Sainz's lead to just 31 seconds. Toyota had hoped that behind him Kankkunen could put on the pressure, but he went off as soon as he tried to attack. So when the day finished, Sainz was still ahead, but Toyota spirits were gloomy. They couldn't see a way of fending off the charging Ricola, and Sainz certainly wasn't wearing the expression of a man poised for a famous victory. By contrast, the rally art mechanics around the Mitsubishi were buzzing, and their man was confident for the final day.
It shouldn't be any problem tomorrow unless Toyota finds something special. Our car is working very well, and I know some of the Yorkshire stages quite well, and I don't think Carlos knows them so well, so it should be okay.
So the last act in the Yorkshire forests. Sainz desperately defending his 31-second lead, and Toyota had drafted in Phil Short, David Llewellyn's co-driver, to help with maps and try and give Sainz every chance on this decisive day. But Ricola maintained the attack, and the gap was down to 22 seconds. A battle to the end in front of huge crowds, considering that many of these forest spectators have to walk 2 or 3 miles from the nearest car parking. And they witnessed a heartbreaking finale for Sainz, a triumphant one for Ricola. 2 stages left, and Sainz would be in tears after a drive shaft failure left him limping out of the stage. Ironically, it was a new drive shaft fitted earlier in the day as a precaution against failure. So the first victory on a World Championship rally wasn't going to go to the young charger from Spain, but the workman-like Finn from Henley. Pentti Ricola calm and controlled, knowing victory was his. Another casualty of these closing stages will be Per Eklund, out from 8th place after gearbox failure in the Lancia Delta. One final spectator stage for Ricola on the British Steel Complex at Humberside, including a water splash to be treated with caution. In recent weeks, we've seen Pentti perhaps struggling to adapt to new machinery in the Mobile One Rally Challenge, the Toyota included. But one opportunity in the Group A Mitsubishi has been grasped in famous style. Pentti Ricola and co-driver Ronan McNamee. Others now, with little to lose, could attack the water splash more directly. Carlos Sainz having to settle for 2nd, but it won't be long before we see the man who was once set for a soccer career with Real Madrid claiming a World Rally Championship victory. Juha Kankkunen barely lifting off, not sparing the spectators at the water splash, but 3rd place for the man who seemed to have the rally in his grasp in the first 2 days. And 4th place here for Kenneth Eriksson. And Ari Vatanen, many people's favourite for victory if the Toyotas failed, but he'd had his adventures and no one was happier than Ari to see victory go to an old rival and near neighbour in Berkshire, Pentti Ricola. Driver's eye view of the water splash there, and a driver's eye view of the subsequent problems the water splash can provide.
Left and jump.
Most spectacular on this final fling for the drivers, Timo Salonen. He came 6th behind Vatanen and Eriksson. Disappointing event for Mazda, but a mightily frustrating one for Toyota, who've led for 52 of the 55 stages. Mazda's in the next 3 places. This was Michael Sundström in 7th, and he was followed by Ingvar Carlsson in 8th and Hannu Mikkola in 9th. The scene, a motorway service station on the M1 before the final run into Nottingham. 44-year-old Pentti Ricola trying to come to grips with his first World Championship success. Carlos Sainz trying to come to terms with a victory that slipped away.
We were trying maximum, absolutely.
Which is all you could ask for as Sainz looked across to the triumphant combination. Ireland's Ronan McNamee, among the best co-drivers around, and the Mitsubishi Galant, a car that lived up to expectations.
Fantastic all the way through, and it's just an incredible enjoyment when you drive a car which does what you want to do it, and it's an unbelievable feeling.
The cheers weren't only for Ricola, but for Malcolm Wilson, who got home in the top 10, making up for Dave Metcalf's late exit in the Nova. And for Gwyndaf Evans, who followed Wilson home in 11th. That's how the two-wheel drive battle resolved itself, the front-wheel drive Astra giving Wilson what was an unexpected best British finish.
I didn't think before the start that it would have been possible to actually be the first two-wheel drive car, but I think as per usual, the whole team and the Astras just performed impeccably, just like it has done on the previous World Championship events this year. We haven't had any problems at all with the car. The whole thing has just run perfectly for us.
Perfect for Pentti as well. As he drove up the winner's ramp, he triggered a switch which turned on the Nottingham Christmas lights and sparked new life into a career that most people thought was coming to an end. Pentti Ricola and Ronan McNamee, winners of the '89 Lombard RAC Rally.